I was a cop for 30 years and retired at the age of 50, so of course I had some weird calls. But I'll never forget the night my partner, Steve, and I were called to respond to a domestic abuse report. The call was made by a neighbor. These calls were never really a big deal. They usually gave us something to do during the night. Not that I enjoyed dealing with couples fighting. We arrived at the house. I still vividly remember the address, and I remember the door was left wide open. The second we stepped inside, the strong scent of marijuana filled our lungs. It was everywhere, but it wasn't just marijuana. There was a strong chemical smell, too, which we assumed was either meth or cocaine. We made our presence known by calling out for the couple to come into sight. A thump from upstairs gave away their location. Steve had his hand on his holster, ready to pull his gun. But I wasn't nervous yet. Steve told me to move quietly up the stairs. We normally listened to each other, so I humored his paranoia. There were 3 doors, 2 open and 1 closed. The closed door led to where the thud came from. I banged on the door before swinging it open myself. The smell was the first thing we noticed. Then the body. It was very obviously rotting, even in the dark. We pulled our guns. Steve turned on the light and I told him to scan that room while I searched the rest of the house. I was shaking all over now. I hated my job at that moment. I wanted to run back to the car because I was sure I could die at any second. I found my hand stuck on a doorknob until I finally had the courage to turn it and push the door open. I turned the light on, but there was nobody inside. It was a disturbingly tiny room, no windows, no furniture except for a dirty old cot. Steve suddenly screamed, and I rushed across the hall to see what was going on. There was some shirtless guy lying flat on top of one of the dressers in the room. We had him at gunpoint, yelling at him to come down, when something grabbed my ankle and tried to pull me to the floor. A hand was coming from under the bed. I stomped on the arm with my other foot and pulled out a frail, trashy-looking woman who was obviously high. I cuffed her, and Steve cuffed the man. We were on our way out with the 2 crazies screaming at us when one final surprise came. Some psycho upstairs started screaming and charging down the stairs at us with a knife raised. Steve reacted just in time, saving my life by 2 seconds, shooting the guy dead. This was a crack house. Somehow none of the neighbors had smelled anything suspicious. The dead woman on the bed was killed by the man we arrested, who admitted to killing her because of unpaid debts. He was sentenced to life without parole, and the woman was sentenced to 30 years. Steve says he never felt bad about what he did. He says he just rid the world of one more piece of trash. A buddy and I responded to an alarm at an old office building that had been converted into a doctor's office, with a pharmacy attached. Our dispatch received a motion signal from an upstairs office. The key holder arrived and we went in to secure the building. The stairs were locked behind a door that the key holder didn't have a key for, so we took the elevator up to the 2nd floor. The elevator opened to a pitch-black hallway, except for one overhead light at the end. We started checking the doors, and so far, all were secured. We got to the last office, and sure enough, the door was unlocked. We made entry and observed it to be an unused office. The door opened to a sizable waiting room and reception area with about 10 or 12 exam rooms, all cleared without incident. We exited the office and immediately something felt off. That's when I realized the overhead light at our end of the hallway, which had been on before, was now off, replaced by another light near the elevators. I looked at my squad mate and he was completely pale. I asked him what was wrong, and he said, Weren't all those doors we just checked closed and locked? I told him, yeah. Then he said, well, now they're all standing open. Sure enough, all the offices we had just checked were now wide open. The pucker factor kicked in at this point, and we began clearing and securing the offices again. We finished the last one, and just as we were about to head back to the waiting area, the main door slammed shut. Then our radios started going crazy with static feedback. I just wanted to get out of there at that point. We took the elevator back down and tried to contact the key holder again, but she was nowhere to be found. I called dispatch to request a callback number for her, and they told me she was still en route and had an ETA of 5 minutes. I told dispatch we had already been out with the key holder, but they insisted we hadn't. They told us the alarm company had just made contact with her. Eventually, the real key holder arrived. I asked her about the man who had let us in earlier. When I described him, she said it sounded like one of the doctors who used to lease the office on the second floor at the end of the hall. She then told me that doctor had committed suicide at his summer home several days ago. I was responding to a call in the village about noise coming from one of the abandoned buildings. The residents suspected trespassing. I arrived and began searching the building, which used to be a 2-story convenience store. Now it was completely stripped, empty except for the counters and shelves that were attached to the floor. The lights didn't work either. I checked every small aisle for anyone hiding, and then did the same thing upstairs. The place was completely empty. On my way back to my car, I looked up and saw somebody at the window on the second floor. It was a woman with long gray hair past her shoulders, looking down at me with a wide smile. I hurried back inside and ran upstairs in less than 10 seconds. But the window was clear, nobody in sight. I checked all 3 aisles at least 10 times. I checked behind the counter, in the bathroom. Everything was clear. Nervous, I left again. But when I looked back at the window, there she was again, with the same mockingly disturbing smile on her face. I went back upstairs, this time running around all the aisles, trying to find her. I was about to give up and leave when I noticed something in my peripheral vision. It was on the ceiling, a dark shape. I shined my light up there, and there she was. That crazed woman, still smiling, was hanging from the ceiling, using 2 hook-like objects with her hands, while her feet were pressed against the ceiling for support. I rushed out of there, driving straight back to the station. I don't know if she had some kind of mental disorder or was just toying with me, but I'll never forget how she stared at me through the mirror the whole ride back. In all my years as a police officer in Floyd County, Georgia, I've had only 2 truly horrifying experiences. I'll share with you the worst of the 2. It was a slow night, and I was patrolling the dirt roads in my cruiser. There were woods on both sides of the road, and suddenly I spotted somebody jumping into the woods on my left. I only saw half of them as they disappeared so quickly. I pulled up and shined my spotlight into the woods, but I couldn't see them. Unfortunately, it was my job to check on things like this, so I stepped out of the car to investigate. At this point, I was ready to pull my gun, as I was getting pretty scared. Then I heard the snap of a branch behind a tree, which almost made me run back to the car. Instead, I did my job and called for whoever it was to come out. A person wearing a mask stepped out from behind the tree. I ordered them to raise their arms, remove the mask, and come to me slowly. They raised their arms, but didn't remove the mask. I tried to assert my authority by yelling, this time ordering them to take it off. They looked like they were about to do it, but suddenly glanced to their left, then back at me. I heard footsteps to my right. I drew my gun and yelled for everyone to come out with their hands up. If you were in my position, you'd be terrified, too. Another person wearing a mask appeared, this one holding an axe. I kept my gun locked on him, but then footsteps started coming from all directions. I looked around and realized I was surrounded. There were at least 10 people wearing masks, almost in a circle, with only an opening behind me. Half of them were armed with axes and other weapons. I stood there, gun raised but not even aimed at anything at this point, feeling like I was about to throw up. Finally, one of them broke the silence, speaking in a muffled, deep voice. "Go away." My heart dropped. I knew I was going to live, so I turned and ran to the car. I drove half a mile down the road while calling for backup. When the search squad arrived, the whole group had disappeared. I have a theory about this. I believe what I witnessed was some kind of messed up secret society that was planning on trapping an innocent passerby. I think whoever I saw jumping into the woods recognized my car as a police car and tried to hide. If I hadn't been a cop, I think they would have lured me into the woods and done whatever sick thing they had planned.